This is the Hi everyone. This is the lecture for the intermediate project of copying the master copy, and it's the same process you'll basically use for your reinterpretation as well. But you'll just be working from your own photograph that you're going to copy in the style of the master. So, anyways, the one that I chose out of the folder is this one right here. It's Claude Monet. It's one of his cathedral series. And I chose this just because I really love the Cathedral series, and I knew this would be kind of a tough challenge for me, and it's great because it works on some of the things that I struggle a little bit more with these really delicate values and subtle shifts in light. So I thought, well, that's a good one for me to work on. And so I hope you kind of think about that as you're picking whatever image you want to do, is pick something that you feel like you'll learn something from. Don't just pick the thing that looks the easiest to you. And then also keep in mind what you want to do as your reinterpretation. So I think I'm going to look for like a dawn or sunset photo from Joshua Tree where everything kind of turns blue and purple. And so that was why I thought, oh, this might be a really good one for me as far as that as well. So anyways, put some of that thought into it. So I looked at my photo, and if I were going to do this on a canvas, I needed a canvas that was custom made because the dimensions were a little bit longer than the width for the actual ones made. But the closest I came to was an 18 by 24 inch canvas out of what I had on hand here. And this, if this were on an 18-inch wide canvas, it would need to be 26 inches. So I will be shortening it a little bit, or actually not so much shortening it as widening it out a little bit. So keep all of that in mind. As I went through, the very first thing I always do is put some sort of tone down. And I did that with this canvas as well. So you'll see in a second that what I did is I wiped in oil, just like we've done before. And I chose cobalt blue as my tone color. You can choose whatever you want. I just thought this would be a nice background color, and a lot of this painting actually has a lot of cobalt in it, which is nice for me because it's easily identifiable. So one of the things to really understand is that at the time that the Impressionists were working, there were all these new pigments coming out that were bright colors that they had never had before. Artists hadn't had them. And so they were brand new to them. Like when they went to go get paints and make paints, mostly what they could get were earth colors and colors that were a little bit duller in color. And if they got bright colors, then those colors, oftentimes the colors would shift over time. They weren't very good as far as that. When we look at the artists that came through the Impressionists and after, the Impressionist period happened like around the time of the Industrial Revolution. So all of a sudden, there was this thing of like heavy metals and cooking things in these high power furnaces and so on. So the colors that are based out of like the cobalts and the cadmiums, all the cadmiums, they all came about during this time period. So they're really common to find these colors within the artists that painted at that time because they were really having fun having all these bright new colors and reinterpreting what painting could be using those bright colors. So a lot of the painting that I chose has cobalt throughout. It's got other colors as well, but cobalt's kind of the primary. I used it as my back tone. I thought it would be a nice background color if I leave places like in the sky and so on that peek through. After I blocked that in, I used my palette and I mixed and I started making the color that I would want to play with. So I did video tip my palette as well. It sat here for a little bit. But as you look at my palette, what you can see is I've got kind of a wide range of different colors. I've got cadmium yellow light, cadmium yellow medium. I've got cadmium red. I added some alizarin, which was around. It was just a different name and a slightly different color, but pretty close to this. I had a lot of the titanium white. This purple is not typical of that time period. This purple right here might be a little bit more typical because it comes from minerals in the ground. I've got the cerulean blue, which I believe that's around the time that the cerulean blue came about. I've got ultramarine blue, which had been around before that, but was less commonly used and used a little bit more when they found an inexpensive alternative to it. And I've got cobalt blue. I put a little bit of the green that I've got here, which is more of a phthalo green. This was not available at that time. I've got a bunch of wax here. I cannot remember. Oh, this is a brown pink, Italian brown pink. That was available. Then I've got a warm white, which is basically the white, and it's pre-mixed with a tiny bit of a yellow in it, so it's more of a really light warm. And then I've got my umbers here, which were available. So as I go through and mix, as I start mixing the main colors for painting, you'll see that I add wax in. But for this undertone, what I did is I took a little bit of my ultramarine blue, a tiny bit of black, and then a little bit of this violet. And I had a little bit, no I didn't, not on this, on the next one I did, so just disregard that. But I did add a little bit of that violet, which is kind of a really earthy toned violet, although definitely a violet. I mixed them together and then added just a little bit of white to it to make it a little bit more opaque. And this ended up being the color that I started working with next, where I started doing the drawing. So I worked through the drawing and just tried to get the perspective correct. Tried to see major shapes in the beginning and block in the shapes that I know are going to be important to me for the final painting. Lots of things I don't put in at this point, all the little details that you see within this image, all these areas I didn't even really worry about other than trying to get a little bit of this. All this detail, I don't worry about that. That's going to be blocked in as I paint. So I just tried to get enough framework in here that I felt like I could start working and blocking in color and start deciding where things go. And you can decide like how much of that, let me back up just a minute there. You can decide how much of the underpainting you need to do. Some of you might be doing images that are primarily just a landscape. They might not be much but a field of flowers and some clouds. So you might have very minimal drawing. And others might be doing something like the cathedral here where they've got a bit more drawing to do. After I did that, what I did is I took my warm white, we'll go back here and play this again. So I took my warm white and mixed a little bit of cadmium red into it to make it a little bit more of a corally warm color. So I used a little bit of this and a little bit of this, mixed them together, and made kind of a more coral color, really light, warm tone. And it was a little warmer than what I wanted it to be. Go back and go to here again. It was a little bit warmer than I want to be, but that's okay. I'm going to do multiple layers on this to build up the paint. So right now I'm just blocking in. And then after I blocked in that upper part, I came in with this other tone that I mixed, which was a little bit of the blue and a little bit of white. And I think I added a touch of this warm as well, so it didn't feel too separate. And I picked up a little bit of the wax to help keep it, have some body. And I added wax into this area as well. And then came back and started blocking in some of the other parts of the sky, which you can't see so well, so I'll go through that a little bit more quickly. Okay, then after I did that, I mixed a main blue tone. It basically ended up being my darker blue that you can see in the image right here. Okay, so I went through and I decided it's predominantly the cobalt, but the cobalt was pretty bright on its own. So I did add a little bit of my brown pink, which is kind of an orangey transparent brown. I added that in, and then I added a little bit of an umber into it to try and tone it down. I lightened it just a little bit and added some wax. And then I went back in and started blocking in the shapes that I felt like were going to need some of that tone in them. So what I need to do is go through and kind of finish up this area. I'm going to have, you can see from looking at the image, I have some areas here that have a very desaturated orangey color. I've got a little bit stronger pinky corals up here. So all that will need to be blocked in, but this is enough to kind of get you started at this point with seeing how we're going to go through and start building it. Notice that my block-ins are very rough. I'm allowing it to have thicker paint. It might be hard to see, but I am allowing it to have a little bit thicker paint. And trying to get my underlying base so that as I build up the layers on here, I can let pieces of this come or go as I want to do that. And that's about it.